The following program is being presented to you by a community producer. The statements, views, and opinions expressed are not necessarily those of ALC-TV or the City of Avon Lake.
Hello everybody, I would like to welcome you to the Avon Lake Public Library. I'm William Rucker, I'm the director. Thank you for coming out and braving today's very Ohio weather. I'm just here very briefly to say it's been a great pleasure to see all these authors come together. This has been a project that Jerry Vogel has been working on for quite some time, and we're very excited to see it started. So with that, I'll pass along to Jerry to do the introductions.
Okay. Yes, welcome everybody. It's been months working on this. I, of course, did not do this by myself. I had lots of help and lots of support and input from many of my staff who are here, such as William, such as Shay, who is somewhere around here. Oh, Shay. And Karen Scott in the back there, from adult services people. What we're going to do today is we're going to have 3 different panels, and we're going to talk about different aspects of these, and they'll be facilitated, and we will talk about different issues that have to do with writing. For the panels, I'm going to turn things over to our facilitator, Dr. Mary Tavenner, or let's just call her Dr. T from this point forward, okay? Dr. T, I turn it over to you.
First of all, of course, on behalf of all of us writers, we want to thank you, Jerry, because it's an art, it's a journey, and people who have written a book know how much time and sacrifice and work actually goes into producing a book, and the marketing is even harder. So we're really grateful that you've given us this opportunity. I'd like to ask, who are you? And tell us a little bit about you. And maybe you could also, if you want to say something up front about our topic, which is inspiration and perspiration, the writing craft and its obstacles, finding stories and vaulting over blockage. I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about your books or inspiration, perspiration, what's in your life and what's in your journey.
All right, my name is Laura Wadlow Blake. I am a photojournalist, writer, videographer, graphic designer, whoever wants to pay me, I'll do it. My book is Ohio, A Photographic Journey. It is a photo book, so I think mine is a little bit different than most other people sitting in this room or people who want to be a writer, because mostly pictures are in my book, but you still have to craft a story around each image. First of all, the story is told through the photos, but you also have to craft the words around it, and very carefully, because you have fewer words to work with. As far as inspiration is concerned, every morning at dawn when the sun is coming up, that's my inspiration. That's why I get up in the morning. That's why I wait for sunset, because that's where the beauty lies within Ohio. So there you go.
Wow, thank you. Thank you very much, Laura. Nancy, would you tell us about you, please?
Sure, my name's Nancy Christie, and I've been writing my whole life. I started in 2nd grade, so I've been writing like way longer than I want to admit to. But basically, I make my living as a freelance writer, but I really enjoy being an author. I'm the author of 3 books, The Gifts of Change, which I don't have a copy of because I sold out at my last couple events. Traveling Left of Center and Other Stories, which is my literary short story collection, a little Shirley Jackson-ish, a little weird. And then this one, Rut Busting Book for Writers, which is the book that came out most recently. And it's all about breaking out of your creative, professional, practical ruts, whatever's impeding the writing process for you. I've got 2 books that are in the works, one that will come out next year, one that will come out the year after. And I write to make a living, I write for joy, I write because that's probably the only thing I can do really, really well.
Oh, may I ask you, where is Austin Town, or just curious?
Youngstown. If you think Youngstown, it's a suburb of, yeah, so it's about an hour and a half away from here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
My name is Deb Gilder. I am a retired speech therapist. I didn't know I was going to become an author, but here I am. My husband passed away a number of years ago, and it was quite the journey. And I was inspired by a couple friends who said, you know, maybe you should tell your story and write a book. And so I tried it, and it took a lot of encouragement of my own just to keep me pushing forward, because I think that at some point I figured, you know, a lot of people go through things in their lives, and why is my story so different than anyone else's? And then I realized that everybody has a unique perspective. I mean, we just all look at it differently, and we write about it differently, and we describe it differently. And if my story can be helpful to anyone out there, it was certainly helpful to me, then I think I will have served the purpose of writing a book. So, if I write another one, I don't know. Oh, okay, I guess I could say it. I didn't bring it, but it's out there. Unexpected Grace, Journey of Love, Loss, and Peace.
Hi, my name is Phyllis McGold, and I am a Cleveland girl, an old Cleveland girl, transplanted to Westerville, Columbus, Ohio. I started my love of reading and writing too when I was about 7 years old. I always felt I had a story in me. And then I went to high school, went to college, got married, had kids, and worked for Wynton Marsalis, worked for the International Baccalaureate. And all of a sudden I was 65 years old, and I said I need to write this book, because who knows how much longer I got to write it. So I wrote it, and the title of it is A Beast No More, and it's actually, I was an English teacher, and the main inspiration for it was discussions with my students who read Hamlet. It's a quote from Hamlet. And they, for 20 years I taught Hamlet, and there's a part in the book where he's wondering whether he should aspire to something greater, and he's beating himself up because he says, I'm a beast no more, I'm no more than a beast, I'm not doing anything but eating, drinking, and sleeping. So the first 15 years I taught the book, my students were like, oh yes, we need to aspire to something higher. The last 5 years, the students were saying, well, there's nothing wrong with just eating, sleeping, and drinking. So I'm like, I need to write a book about 3 Cleveland girls who aspire to something greater. So that's what the book is about.
We're talking about inspiration, and I've heard you say different things about it. But my question is, how would you define it? And you did already tell us how you felt it, but would you just elaborate just a little bit about this inspiration? How do you define it?
One of the great joys of teaching literature is you get to read great writers and great thinkers. And Tolstoy has a book, an essay, I forget what it is now, about art. And he says the 3 phases of art are inspiration, expression, and publication. And he defined inspiration, and I can't better him with this. He said you see something, or you hear something, or you have a feeling for something, and you're compelled to act on it. You either paint or write or become an activist. And so that's how I would steal his definition, saying inspiration is something that moves you so much you have to act on it, whether it's through art or anything else in life.
Fantastic. Deb, could you give us your perspective or what you think about that?
I totally agree with that, and I think that it's kind of, for me, it's like when everything is right in the universe and you're just in tune with the greater being, you know. And I think when you are on that space, you know, when you're in a place of gratitude and appreciation, and you are taking it all in, then you are divinely inspired, and it comes from within. But I also think that you can be inspired externally. Obviously, you know, you see something wonderful happen to somebody else, or you see a beautiful sunset, and you're inspired in that direction also. But ultimately, it takes you back to that internal sort of divine place within yourself, and I think as I was writing my book, I felt inspired every time I sat down and wrote, because I was just totally immersed in the process, and I felt like that was the connection that was coming through me, you know, through my heart. So to me, that's what it was about.
When I heard the word divine, and the etymology of inspiration, I don't have my dictionary here, but spirit in.
Right.
The spirit is in you, and you move to do something. So the creative spirit. So that's we really appreciate that. Nancy, what's your thoughts on inspiration? How would you define it?
Well, inspiration, at least for me, is not something that I'm actively looking for. It's more like something happens. I see something, I hear something. In some cases, I dream something. okay? And especially when it comes to my fiction. And it's like, okay, I have to work on this. But at the same time, I think writers who wait only for inspiration can be waiting a really long time. So, you know, while you can't control the inspiration from coming, you can and you need to put yourself always in a place so that you're receptive to it, so that you are aware of it, so you're always kind of looking at things and listening to things with that writer's mind, so you can take a perfectly ordinary interaction that you happen to witness, and that sends you down a path and you go, oh, what if? You know, so I think a lot of inspiration is, for it to work, it requires you to be paying attention as a writer. You know, it's not a gift that's handed to you so much as something that you have to be ready for and open to.
You mentioned inspiration as a writer in dreams, that you've had
Yes.
dreams. And I've known other writers like that. I'm curious now, how many of you have ever had a dream that kind of inspired you to do some writing? Anybody? Whoa! Okay, just was curious. Thank you. All right, Laura, what's your take on this?
Well, I mean, I write a lot of stories. I get assigned a story from a magazine that I work for, and a lot of them are uninspiring. But some of them really become an obsession, and it's those kind of stories that you kind of mull over and you're like, wow, this is exciting, and then you get more excited and then you become obsessed. And I think that really, if you want to spend so much time writing something, you really have to be obsessed with the topic. And I mean, that's really what it is, falling in love and being so inspired to move, as you said. And you could be moved to act, but that doesn't always mean you're going to finish. You know, and how many people have been inspired and couldn't just like, okay, let's take it to the next level. Well, that's why we're here, right? It's all about the perspiration part of things, right?
Absolutely. And that's really, you're going to hold on to the mic, okay? Because that's what I want to talk about too, is like, you think that writing a book is more about perspiration than inspiration, or vice versa? What do you think?
I think everybody's different, but you definitely, there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. You might have a great idea, but you struggle with putting the words together properly. So it really is working and crafting, and that part is the hard work. The inspiration is easy. It's the hard work that's not so easy.
Wow, well said. Okay, and would you tell us, Nancy, what your thoughts are?
I totally agree with that. It is because, you know, we can all say, oh, I'm going to write a story about blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, then, and because you were inspired. But the actual doing of it, that's the labor. That's the crafting. And, you know, I use the analogy that, you know, if inspiration is yeast, yeast alone is not going to produce a lot of bread. You've got to put the work into it. You've got to put all the ingredients into it. You can be very inspired, but if you don't have the skill level, that bread is not going to raise or rise, as the case may be. I'm never entirely sure if bread is raising or bread is rising, but in any case, the dough is just going to stay flat. So it definitely is both, and it can come in stages too. You can be inspired, you can start the project, now we're into the perspiring part, and maybe it's not going so well, and then something happens and now you are re-inspired. So it is definitely requires both, but I think that the difference between the writers who successfully complete a project and the ones that don't are the ones who don't want to sweat. If you don't want to sweat, don't get into business, because it's a lot of sweating, a lot of crying, but it does require work, a commitment. It's like any other relationship. When you're a writer, you've got a relationship.
I love your yeast analogy. That was great. Loved it. Okay, Deb, what do you think?
For me personally, I think the writing process itself was not hard at all. I mean, it was hard in the fact that you have to keep going and you have to begin and you have to end. But I think I had a story that I wanted to get out there, and so I never felt like it was work to do the writing. Every time I got into it, it was just total immersion for me, and I was just living in the moment, and it was nice. It was actually just a process. It was nice to be feeling that passion and just being in that space. To me, the hard part of it was getting it published and going through all the steps with that and doing the marketing and all the other stuff, really. I think, if I would become a writer of more books, then perhaps I would feel like it was more work. But for this particular instance, it was just more inspiration for me.
Sounds like you were like compelled to write.
I think I was, and once I got started, and I just had a reason for it to be out there. So
That's awesome. Awesome. Phyllis, what's your take on perspiration versus inspiration?
Secret deodorant. For me, the perspiration was time and discipline. It took me a long time to sit down and write this novel, and when I did, I really had to give everything else up. No work, no nothing. You have to really donate every ounce of your time, every minute of your time. The discipline came in when you're doing a little research. One of the characters in my book, I had her become a NASA scientist. She's actually based on a person I know from my high school. So it took me like a month to write that chapter because I Googled NASA in Cleveland. And I'm telling you, Cleveland, the history of Cleveland in the 50s and 60s, probably most of you know this, but oh my goodness, it was so fascinating. So I kept finding more wonderful things that happened at that NASA plant in Brook Park. And so I should have been done probably in a couple days, but because I didn't have the discipline to keep clicking search, it took me a longer time. And the commitment, of course. Once you say you're going to do it, you just got to sit down and do it. So the perspiration for me was time, discipline, and commitment.
So well said. I can identify with everything you're saying. But I'd like to ask each of you again now, what have you found the most difficult about the writing process, and what did you do to overcome that particular impediment? What did you find most difficult? And how did you overcome it?
For this particular story, since a lot of it was kind of semi-autobiographical, and the three characters were actually based on people I knew, even though they aren't the people I knew. So the girl who's Rosie in my book, if you should happen to buy it, she really didn't do drugs and stuff. But she is based on a real person. But getting over the obstacles, it is hard to commit to do it. And I would say my friends got me through it. When I said this really, no one's going to buy this, and they would say, you got to do it, it's going to be okay. So my obstacles were overcome by my daughters and my friends who kept telling me, you always wanted to do this, so do it.
That's so wonderful to have cheerleaders. That is very helpful.
Yes, it is. One of them sitting right over there.
I think the hardest part for me was actually saying what I wanted to say and have it sound like I wanted it to sound. I went through and just kept re-editing, and I'd get it to the point where I thought it was just right, and then I'd wait a couple days and I'd go back and read it, and I'm like, no, maybe not, maybe I could change this or that. So maybe that's just my own perfectionism coming out. I just wanted it to be, to say and convey what I wanted it to convey, and because I was inspired to write it, I was hoping that it would inspire others, and so I kind of wanted to make sure that happened when I wrote it. So I just persevered, I guess, more than anything.
I can't imagine for me writing a book the first time, you just put it all there and it's all intact. I mean, I know I have somebody that edits my book and looks at how I said things, even though I've written it 2 or 3 times, like you seem to have done it. So did you have any other eyes look at it, or all?
I did eventually, yeah. The original version was almost twice as long as the version that it ended up being, and
wow, okay.
It was helpful, I think, just to reorganize it a little bit, but not too much. I was sort of put off that she took parts of it out. It's like, wait a minute, I worked so hard on that part. Don't take that out. But
you ultimately decided, right?
I did.
What did stay and
we
what
worked
went.
together back and forth, and I put stuff back in, and she took it out, and vice versa. And she told me people don't have long attention spans. So she told me, I'm like, all right, so it worked out. But yeah, I definitely need it. And looking back, I'm very glad I had an editor to work through that with me. So
Fantastic. Other writers are always helpful. Nancy, what do you have to tell us and share with us?
Well, my situation's a little bit different than maybe a lot of people who are writing books, because I make my living as a full-time writer, not from books. Anybody who thinks you're going to make a living from books,
Good luck.
yeah, okay, wake up. But, I'm a freelance copywriter by trade, so I've been full-time since '96, and even before that I wrote for magazines and newspapers, so I don't have any trouble in terms of the discipline to sit down and write. I am not easily distracted by household tasks, as anybody who wants to go run their finger on my furniture can tell you, because it does need to be cleaned, I know that. So that's not the problem. The problem is because I have client work, which pays the bills, book writing, which doesn't, which is a line item on the expense account. The problem for me is making time to write the books without feeling like, oh, I shouldn't be doing this, I should be focusing on earning a living. So the way I deal with that is I have a specific amount of time that I work on my books, whatever the book project is, every morning before I start on my pay jobs. Okay, so there's like the book part of my life or the short story part of my life also, because I love writing those. And then the pay work, try to also work on the books on weekends where I could put a bigger chunk, unless a client wants something done really quickly and they're paying for the privilege of getting it done. Money always trumps, let me tell you. When you are self-employed and your income is the only income coming in, keeping the lights on, money works first. But, for me, it has to be the first thing so that I'm not dealing with the guilt. Guilt is a big thing, which explains why I get up at 4 o'clock in the morning, including today. This is how I have to block it out. I have to differentiate between book writing and client work. And then, of course, as everybody alluded to, all the associated marketing, which sucks up vast quantities of time as well. So, that's, if I won the lottery, believe me, I would just be writing short stories if I won the lottery. But it is being able to break your life out into the components so that you can get everything done and still, I guess, in theory, have some kind of a life. I don't know. But if anybody knows how to have a life too, let me know. But yeah, don't have that. So.
You address perspiration very well, and Kelly, I'm sure you listened to just about every word. So took it all in, I'm sure. Okay, what do you think, Laura?
Nancy nailed it, right? Like, money comes first, and so you're going to do working assignments first. The other thing I have a problem with is getting distracted, like, oh, I could go in this direction, or I could go in this direction, when it's your own project, and trying to stay in line and stay focused on like one topic is one of my most difficult things. I was lucky to have a team of people. I had an editor, an art director, and they were saying, okay, well, maybe we take this out and we put this in, and it made sense, and it all ended up working. But it definitely, to me, helped to have some people backing you up, and having a good editor is really, really key, I think.
Laura, hold on to the mic, please. And we've got one more thought that maybe you could share with us. What advice do you have for other writers when they experience writer's block? I mean, inspiration is great, but what happens when you just can't sit down and write again? If that's happened to you, how did you?
That's easy. Just a change of scenery for me helps tremendously. I love to travel. I'll plan a trip. And just get out of your same old rut and your routine. And to me, that really helps. I don't know how to explain it any better, but it doesn't have to be the Caribbean. It could be, Sandusky. Just anywhere.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, Nancy.
Just getting out of your space, and even if you cannot go far, okay, if you always work in the same place, even in your house, just go to your library to write, go to a coffee shop, when the weather's nice, go outside. Even when the weather's not nice, go outside. The other thing you can do is change up your process a little bit. One thing I encourage you to do is if you always work on the computer, which I always do because I really hate to transcribe, but try writing, by hand. Try writing with colored pencils. Try, if you are used to writing in silence, try putting on some music. See if that inspires you. You basically just have to shake things up. And one thing I have found is, when you're working on something and you're stuck and you feel like you can't move forward, walk away. Trust me, you will walk away and you'll go, I'm gonna go run the sweeper, mow the lawn, whatever. When you walk away, you have to go do something physical, because if you just sit down in front of TV that doesn't work, go do something physical. Get the blood moving, go for a walk, whatever. Trust me, the minute you are away from your desk is when all of a sudden it'll be like, oh, that's how I could deal with that, which is why I really love that little memo recording thing on my phone, because God knows I'm not going to remember that fantastic line that just popped into my head. So, make full use of technology. If you've got a great line, even if people are looking at you weird, go ahead and record it. But just shake things up a little bit. Sometimes that's all that's needed, is just shake it up a little bit.
Okay, Deb, what do you think?
All of that, plus for me, it's just getting out in nature always takes me to a different place. I can sort of get into that sort of meditative walk and just enjoy the outdoors. I seem to have a lot of my inspirations when I'm in bed at night trying to sleep, and I'm not sleeping. I'm just laying there, and all of a sudden I start thinking about stuff, and there it is, and just like you said, it's like, oh, that's really good. When you get up in the morning, it's not quite, remember exactly how it went, but it sounded so good that night before. So I would say a change of scenery for sure. And,
Did you ever put the light on and then write a few notes before you went back to sleep or anything?
No,
that happened to you?
I didn't. I should have probably, because I had I had whole chapters just in my head. I'm like, oh, that was really good. But no, I didn't do that. I should have.
Okay, Phyllis.
Everything they said is marvelous, but I never had the strength to get up and walk away, so I perspired at the computer. But if I had advice, just from what I experienced, is to make sure that you're writing in your own voice. Because one of my obstacles was when I started writing, because I taught English and all the great writers and read them and loved them. So I thought there was a James Joyce in me, and there wasn't. Everything kept up coming Cleveland Girl. When I tried to write something grand, like one of the older characters gets dementia, so I wanted to go into the cerebral aspects of what happens in the brain, blah, blah, blah. And then I ended up saying she went off the road. So be true to your own voice. Don't try to be someone else, because your own voice and your own spirit is what will give you an authentic story and the best writing you can do.
Anybody have, you want to address a question to somebody or something you'd like to make a comment about or observation, whatever? To anybody? Go right ahead. Yeah. Yes, you.
For myself and a couple of other people that I know, writing all kinds of things, articles and things like that you've all done. And all of us agree that there's probably a book in there somewhere, probably a novel in there somewhere, but scared to death of dialogue. Just even the thought of trying to put dialogue together just paralyzes all three of us.
Real quick, I will say that, because dialogue was the hardest thing to write. And I actually got out of it in part of my book, because with three characters, they each have to have their own voice. So what I did when they went away to college, I had them write letters to each other instead of talk to each other. And so that showed my weakness as a writer, because I couldn't write dialogue to save my life. But it saved the characters, because it expressed what was inside the characters through their own voice in the letters. And they didn't have to, the letters went back and forth, but they weren't talking on the phone or having dialogue face to face. So letters is a good cop-out for dialogue.
Anybody else want to ask? Yes, right over there, please. Yeah, go ahead and stand if you don't mind. Then we can hear you better.
So, Phyllis, I all agree with what you say. I think that putting it in your own way is so important, and it took me a long time, because I was born in an age in the 50s, 60s, 70s where all these changes with women came. But I was someone who was in a family where my older sister was like a terror. And then my brother was a big sports guy, and my other little sister just could care less. And so I just, in order to keep peace in the house, I was just the good girl. And I did what people said. I didn't realize until I got out in the world that everybody's telling me what to do and saying, this is how it should be done, and this is what sells, and this is, and I'm so appreciative for the women's movement having continued. And plus, I was in the Marine Corps, so that really helped too, because I went into an organization where I was told by my woman recruiter that this is a man's organization and they don't want you, just as long as you know that. And so that really helps. But the whole women's movement and expressing yourself and really speaking and writing in your own voice, that's just like wonderful. So I just totally agree that it's a challenge, at least it was for me, to break that and say, I'm finally here. Yeah, yeah.
I'm proud of it.
And proud of it. Number 5.
Be true to your own voice. That is so important. Go ahead, do you have a question? Yes.
I do, but it's to this lady right here. One thing you might want to try in the dialogue, if you go out and you're out in public, just kind of listen to other people. You're just sitting there, listen to their conversations. It's not like you're trying to eavesdrop, but what they say.
Oh, yeah, you are. That is our function as writers. We are supposed to snoop and eavesdrop.
Watch their body language. I mean, you don't want he said, she said, he did this, and da-da-da-da-da, and L-Y, and none of that. Just kind of watch them, observe, watch all of us today. What are they doing? What's that lady doing over there with the crazy hair, whatever. And then, I'm a series junkie. My husband and I, we watch the TV. Listen to what they're doing, how they're doing it, what they're saying and not saying. A lot of times dialogue is, what else is going on. It's not just boom, 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 boom. See if it doesn't help you. Thank you.